Hi guys, Will, just time prepping. How are you guys this fine Tuesday? Hey, I apologize for not getting this video out earlier, but out of our control during this time of the year. The company comes over, you just have to deal with it. So, let's get with it since we're late. We're going to start out on chapter 7, and that will kind of recap a little bit for us going into the new chapter, into the new section, and then into the new chapter. So we're going to start with section 7, which is Ken Harrison, and he's located in Arizona. Once again, a target for the government they represented, the military was especially hard hit. Most of the servicemen and women who survived later denied they were ever part of the armed force. As 3 of every 10 came through the war alive, despite being so well trained. Most of the deaths came from attacks by individuals in their own groups and from neighbors who had ended up with desperation on their side. Even those who were still following orders didn't have an easy time of it. They became walking targets. Damn, Ken ducked, pushing the muddy hardback as fast as it would go. Fort Defiance was under siege. Furious and terrified citizens were trying to get over and through the 10-foot-high electric fence that surrounded the 17-mile-wide compound. It sounded like a giant bug or zapper. Poles, cars, furniture, and even people were being used to try to break up the live wires, but so far the strong magnetic force had held. It didn't keep out the bullets through the Marine pulled his cover on tighter as popping grew steadier, almost rhythmic. Someone out there was firing an assault rifle. Ken's grip on the wheel tightened. Knuckles white, he hated the feeling of near panic that lurked under the surface. He had to get there first. Choppers were swarming over the grounds of the base trying to evacuate the Marines and draftees, but the violent winds gusting from the direction of Houston made landing difficult and might give him a chance. In the past, the weather was the worst challenge the pilots had to face here. Now it was the least of their worries. Arriving birds were being blown out of the smoky skies before they could even descend to safety, crashing, exploding, and flinging twisted metal debris into the screaming mob of rioters. A few of the aircraft were only damaged and crashed later in a remote location, but many were lost on the scene. The telephone poles and grenade launchers were hard for the overloaded choppers to avoid. In short, it was mayhem. Yes, the cadet barracks came into full view through the thicket of trees. He has to be here. Men shouted. Hungry riders screamed. Guns fired, and a gust after violent gust of stomach-churning wind pushed against the truck, slowing it down. The sky above the base roiled with thick red clouds that flashed angrily, and black flakes fell like a blizzard, coating everything with a heavy layer of soot that looked like ash from a volcano. Ken looked up suddenly, the shadow of the chopper passing overhead. Not what drew his attention, but the silence of its engines. He started in shock as the big bird began to spiral toward him. Ken mashed the pedal and ducked as the chopper spun past, but the truck's engine had died, too, and the hardback didn't respond. He met the eyes of the horrified pilot for a brief second before the chopper hit the main dorm and exploded. Orange flames and thick black smoke billowed upward, and Ken's heart froze as the cheers and screams of those outside the fence grew louder, hungrier. If the boy had been in there, he was dead now. No one could have survived that. Section 8. Falling apart at the seams. By midnight, communication lines were down across the country. There was no internet, no phones, no cable, and unchecked writing spread across the nation. With their lives suddenly blown away, the stunned survivors had no idea what to do. Few thought to help each other. split between broken states that had only small areas capable of sustaining life. Most people tried to get out of the cities, searching for safety and unaware that it no longer existed. Millions were lost in the aftermath. At dawn, the American people were confident and arrogant about their future. By dusk, the dream was crushed, faith not only shaken, but also mortally wounded. Less than a week after the war, the death toll stood at 250 million in the United States alone. A million of those who survived the initial blasts were seriously injured or blinded, and always are. The numbers were staggering, inconceivable, and yet real. Our worst fears had been proven true. The horribly high cost of freedom was paid with the blood of the innocent, as debts like these in the end always are. The people should have been prepared, ready, and instead the government hurt their citizens as much as the actual bombs did. The draft took tens of thousands of desperately needed doctors, scientists, nurses, engineers, and it stripped farms and factories alike of their crops and livestock, leaving their owners' bodies rotting where they fell. They took it all. Some people fled before the president's broadcast aired, tipped off by the determined sources as the governments began locking down the internet. A few of those quick-thinking souls survived, but flight was not an option for most people. There were loved ones and supplies to be gathered first, and by then the roads were crammed with traffic and accidents and were impassable. It forces those people to either wait in their cars for the convoys of draft trucks or set out on foot to find somewhere to hide. There were the people who fled too late and got caught out in the open with all those who had already been on the road for the holiday. The rest of us hunkered down in where we were and hoped our town wasn't a direct target or near one. The war came when it wasn't guarding against it, and then the life became hard. Beginning in Chapter 2, we'll do one section of Chapter 2, and then we'll leave it at that for today. Chapter 2 starts out with the title being Storm Tracker. The date's January 1st, 2013, outside Bonneville, Wyoming. There was a storm coming. Samantha's tone was low, respectful in the cold, Wyoming wind, but it didn't matter. Tell us something we don't know. It's rained every day since Eugenius blew us up, her captor lashed out. Excuse me. Samantha had never hated anyone as much as she did the two drunken men sprawled carelessly on the lawn behind her. They were warm in their paint-stained overalls and long johns, but she shivered miserably in the same torn, reeking office clothes she'd been taken in. She wanted to be alone inside the rusty van, out of the icy wind, and searching for something she could use as a weapon, but the two males liked to wait until she was nearing frostbite before climbing in behind her to take what they wanted. The wind blew harder, bringing sounds of dogs yapping unnecessarily in hunger, and thin, distant screams, loud bangs they couldn't identify. Sam tried to huddle into a ball that would keep it all out. The thought of sex while there were bodies rotting in cars around them made her stomach lurch. It was supposed to be Henry's night, the younger of the Crew's painting company brothers who were sharing her, but Melvin was making shot after shot of Wild Turkey disappear. When he got like this, both Samantha and Henry gave him what he wanted to keep from getting bent out of shape. Melvin was mean and bitter when he was sober, but he was a violent drunk. Instant Dick, she thought, skimming the vague shapes of farmhouses and fields at the other end of the windy overpass. Just add alcohol. Blackness surrounded them in every direction. There wasn't a speck of light except for their tiny fire. Gently touching her swollen lip, Samantha tried not to think about the horrors she couldn't identify through the dark. The two with her were enough. "Where are we going to go, Mel? It's all trashed." Melvin took another long swig from the dirty brown bottle, dug at the filthy crotch under his large stomach. "Nah, man, not south. We'll stock up and go to Mexico, take over like an A-team. Don't have to go on a boat, do we?" "Probably." Melvin's voice was distracted. Bloodshot leer on the pale legs showing benefit beneath Samantha's grimy skirt, staring at his own thumbprint on her calf. "Ain't going on no boat," Henry whined, blowing out a hard belch. Melvin gestured towards Sam, his mean smile showing yellow, broken teeth. He threw a small rock at her, hard, and both men laughed when she cried out in pain. Knowing the overweight alcoholics were hoping she'd fight, Samantha let their laughter wash over her as she listened to the terribly angry earth around them, resisting the urge to dig at her dirty hair or rub her stinging lip. The two abusive pigs who were keeping her captive and passing her like a bottle assumed she meant a thunderstorm, but it suggested snow to her, maybe even a blue norther. And about the weather, Samantha was hardly ever wrong. Her predictions had earned her the pass to safety. Had given her this hell instead, but she didn't consider trying to tell them again that a storm was coming. The long-haired, 30-something-year-old painters liked to pinch and slap as punishments, and she was already covered in bruises. Keeping her mouth shut was a hard lesson to learn. "Get away, try again," her heart demanded. The wind suddenly blew harder through the Wyoming basin as to reinforce the thought. Sam shivered. The wounds and marks from her first attempt had mostly healed, but the damage to her self-respect never would. Not that she had time for something as trivial as that. Only survival mattered now. The trio tensed at a loud bang echoing from the west, but when a second shot didn't come, the man returned to their bottle, and their slave resumed her desperate plans. She was a fighter. She just needed to stack the battle. Closing her eyes, Samantha inhaled deeply. There would definitely be snow to usher in the new year, and before morning, too. Could it help her? Maybe, if she manipulated things a little. Right now, the two men were drinking heavily, set to stay up late and wake up even later. What would they do upon rising to a foot of snow on the ground? She frowned. They would take the way they had already cleared to get this far and return to the other end of the overpass, to the deserted farmhouse they stayed in last night. The brothers hole up and wait out the weather, even though they were only an hour from moving the last of the abandoned vehicles out of the way, before they'd be in the Bonneville city limits, an ugly place full of the dead and the wails of those who would soon follow. The thought of being snowed in with these horny idiots filled her gut with hot fire, and her mind on the problem while her stomach burned. She had always been a plan-ahead person, but who the hell could have prepared for this? What she needed was for the heartless drunks to sleep now and get up ready to go on before the snow got bad. It would put them all out in the blizzard together and might give her an opportunity to escape. "You know how, don't you?" She shuddered, drawing a deep breath. Yes, she did, but she didn't want to. Couldn't stand even the thought of being the one who started it, let alone having to participate or pretend she was willing. What she needed was a weapon. It would be easier to kill them. Sam ached to think of possible help at the Essex compound, being so close and yet so far away, but she would do what she had to do. Pop, pop, pop. The sound of engines and tires squealing followed the loud gunshots, echoing from the total darkness to the south. Coming their way? Shit, they're back. Henry got the fire out. Samantha was already climbing into the van as fast as the loudly clinking chain around her ankles would allow, as eager for the tepid warmth of the hiding place. She slid onto the bed in the near of the van, near the rear of the van, and they were plunged into darkness when the two men piled in behind her, slamming the door. She didn't struggle when Melvin pulled her roughly between them. The males cleared tiny circles on the dirty windows. Samantha kept her head down. She would be shoved away if she tried to peer, but she found she could easily imagine the loud group that was now within at least a half-mile of the overpass where they were hiding. There would be only lights at first and gunshots, and then dirty, muddy, rusted-out jeeps and trucks with gun racks. There would be cruel shouts and mean gestures, scarred, abused women cowering in the trunks and on the floorboards, and their futures grim, short. All of it surrounded with dangers, reckless driving, shooting at anything that caught their attention, and complete disregard for all the death that had already occurred. Danger filled the air as the noises got louder, and the barely breathing trio in the van remained still and silent. As the group got closer, slugs began to slam into the overpass. Bullets hit the cars around them and then the van, making Sam bite her wrist to keep from screaming. The gang drove very slowly, it seemed to her, headlights glaring off the dirty windows. None of them budged. They were all glad when the men avoided the jammed-up overpass from Interstate 26, traveling below it instead. They seemed to be going directly into Bonneville, where desperate voices on the van CB radio had been calling for help for the last few days, for Americans' assistance. What are they calling for, and what's coming? Sam thought, trying to ignore the hands now wringing her sore body from both sides, are as opposites as they can be. As the last of the engine noises faded, the van began to rock. Gently at first, it soon became violent, and a scream echoed. Full of pain, the sound was cut off suddenly, and light, freezing rain began to fall over the broken land. A short, long, so long, her mind screamed. Hour later, the brothers were passed out in the back, and Samantha was in the front passenger seat, as far away from them as the rawhide leashed around her would allow. Full of cold depression, she longed for even a cup of Starbucks coffee as she shivered and hurt. She wiped away a single tear as the thought of where she'd been at this time 2 weeks ago at a rear table with a paper cup, the car and the driver idling in front. What a difference from this hell. All right, you guys, that's it for today. As you can see, the story is really getting intense now, and I hope you guys are enjoying this story. This is going to give you guys all something to think about, just in case, we should become a nation in another world war. So I want to thank you guys for coming and watching. Again, I apologize tremendously for being so late today. We had a family drop in, so as you know, at this time of year, you gotta kind of go with the punches, so I apologize. So until next time, thanks. I'm gonna cut this a little short, and I'll see you guys it's Wednesday. I'll see you guys on Saturday, and I'll see you out there on the tube.